House Republican Policy Committee will come to order. Representative Jones, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, good morning. Thank you guys very much for being here today. I want to especially thank our host, Representative David Zimmerman, for bringing us here to Lancaster County. I want to thank the Reinholds Fire Company for hosting us and for the work that they do every day protecting our community. Our communities are really fortunate to have so many selfless people, first responders, EMS, policemen that really just make it a wonderful place to call home in rural Pennsylvania. So we're very glad to be here. My name is David Rowe. I have the privilege of serving as the chairman of the House Republican Policy Committee. I also serve the 85th Legislative District as its representative, which covers Union, Snyder, Juniata, and Mifflin counties. I'm going to invite our members here today to introduce themselves.
Good morning, my name is Stephen Rank. I am Constituent Outreach Coordinator for Congressman Lloyd Smucker, who covers all of Lancaster County and then the southern half of York County. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to be here today as he is in session in DC. I'm happy to be here on his behalf. And I also want to mention that I'm a Reinholds native, so very appreciative of the Fire Hall for having us.
Yeah. So, Dave Zimmerman, State Rep for the 99th District. That's right where we are, northeast Lancaster County and southern Berks.
And I'm State Representative Tom Jones. I represent the 98th Legislative District. It's the northwest corner of Lancaster County and the southwest corner of Lebanon County.
Also online, we're joined by Representative Robert Ledbetter from the 109th District, covers Columbia County, and we're also joined by Representative Barbara Gleim from the 199th District in Cumberland County, and we just had her birthday either yesterday or the day before, so happy belated birthday, Representative Gleim. Today's hearing is going to focus on challenges affecting families all across Pennsylvania, and that's the growing difficulty of attaining home ownership. For many, the dream of owning a home feels increasingly out of reach. Housing prices are rising, inventory remains tight, and the cost of building new homes has increased significantly over the last decade. And part of that challenge is supply, but a lot of it is also process. A recent report from the Mercatus Center highlighted how Pennsylvania's highly fragmented housing system spread across more than 2,600 municipalities, each with different zoning rules, permitting requirements, and review processes, creates delays, uncertainty, and adds costs that ultimately get passed along to the home buyer. And these delays matter because affordability matters. The report found that Pennsylvania's median income has increased 75% from roughly median house listing price from $185,000 in 2016 to approximately $325,000 by 2025. Our goal today is to better understand where policy reforms can help remove the unnecessary barriers, streamline approvals, expand housing supply, and ultimately make home ownership more attainable for all Pennsylvania families. We appreciate you experts who have come here today to participate in the discussion and look forward to a productive conversation. We're going to start things off, Representative Zimmerman, with any opening remarks.
Yeah, I just want to welcome everyone here. Really looking forward to the testimony, and Lancaster County really is, I think, unique from many other counties, and these guys that do some developing beyond just the Lancaster County borders know that, you know, each region, each area is just a little bit different from another. But some major challenges in Lancaster County. It's a county that we in the 2010 census we were at 500,000 people. In 2020 we were 552,000, I believe. So tremendous growth. At the same time, you know, there's a large interest in trying to preserve the best of farms here in Lancaster County, and also how do we, you know, provide housing, and how do we do that in light of lots of regulations and a long process and so forth. So really looking forward to it. I think we have a good group of testifiers. You guys all have kind of different issues that you'll talk about, but all issues that you face, and makes it much more challenging to, you know, get some building done and keep costs in line and so forth. So we're looking forward to the morning. So thanks, guys, for being willing to testify.
The policy committee's job is to sort of be the fact-finding arm of the caucus. Our job is to come out to different parts of the state, learn about the challenges and issues facing those parts of the state, and also to learn from the people like you who are the boots on the ground, who best understand the issues, because what you share with us today allows us to go back to Harrisburg to pursue those meaningful policy changes, knowing that you guys, the movers and shakers, the people who make these things happen, if these are the solutions you're advocating for, they're solutions that we want to advocate for in Harrisburg as well. So I want to thank our panel for being here today. Each of you are going to bring valuable firsthand experience that we are very grateful that you're willing to share with us. First of all, we have Randy Hess, who's the president of Hess Homes. We have Cliff Weaver, who's the CEO of Landmark Homes. And we have Mario Massioli, did I say that correctly? Fantastic, who's the owner of Acorn Build Homes. I want to thank you all very much for being here today. We're going to turn it over to you guys for testimony. We're going to let you guys go for 3 to 5 minutes each, and then we're going to have questions from the members. And we were going to start off. I think, Randy, you're up first, correct? Randy, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you all for having us here this morning to discuss the issues of housing affordability in Pennsylvania. We appreciate the opportunity. I'll read from a prepared statement and answer any questions, obviously, that you may have. When it comes to housing affordability, everybody seems to want to look for that magic bullet solution, right? One thing that can then streamline the process. However, due to Pennsylvania's highly fragmented system of governance, which you touched on, and multiple layers of regulation, many of which unfortunately conflict with each other, there's no single path forward. Given the limited time this morning, I'll focus on several key contributors to rising housing costs. First, most importantly, is to frame the structure, in my opinion, of housing costs. It can really be broken down into 2 categories, vertical and horizontal. Vertical costs are going to be those related to the construction of the homes themselves, the buildings, i.e. building codes, energy requirements, that sort of thing. And although building codes certainly are worthy of discussion and do add a degree of cost, the cost of the vertical really pales in comparison to what we're finding on the horizontal. So the horizontal, of course, includes the land acquisition, the entitlement of that land, and the site improvements. While vertical regulations such as building codes and accessibility standards and energy requirements do increase costs, again, they are significantly outweighed by the horizontal costs. For that reason, my remarks this morning will focus primarily on the horizontal. Number one, just touch on zoning constraints. One major issue when it comes to zoning is I call it the old concept of use by right in a zoning ordinance. Use by right still exists, but in practice it has been significantly restricted or in some municipalities eliminated through a process they refer to as form-based zoning. Most projects now require either a special exception or a conditional use approval. If you're working in a township that has adopted form-based zoning, in my opinion, it is essentially nothing but a conditional use. In some instances, a 900-page document, uses by right have, for the most part, been eliminated. When you have to go through a conditional use process for approval, it can add anywhere from 6 to 12 months, give or take, before a project can even begin the land development review. That's just the zoning process. The conditional use process also allows municipalities, we'll term broad discretion, to impose conditions, often without meaningful checks and balances. So conditional use, for lack of a better term, is a municipality saying, we will approve your project, but we want these conditions met. And whatever those conditions are, you must abide by, and there are no checks and balances with that. They can attach whatever conditions they see fit. Although the Pennsylvania MPC does allow for some performance standards to be applied to municipal review periods, in many cases, one of the first steps we've seen recently in the review process is for municipalities to require property owners to sign documents waiving their right to enforce the MPC prior to plan processing. I have run across this in several municipalities in recent years. Straight up, a document, you waive your right to enforce MPC review requirements, or we won't process your plan. That is also a large stumbling block. Zoning density levels, we can also touch on zoning, that's a zoning issue. They have simply not kept pace with the Lancaster County Planning Commission recommendations over the past 30 years. We're not even close. I would have to look at the data again, but I think we're averaging around 4 to 4.5 units per acre. Their recommendation was, for the last 30 years, has been 7.5, and so we're roughly not, a little over 50% of the density they are recommending. When you talk about the land development process, moving on from zoning, developers, property owners may need approvals from up to 11 regulatory bodies, creating a lengthy and costly process. If a project is approved in under 2 years, that is currently considered a win on the development side. Due to the increasing complexity of the process, municipalities' reliance on third-party consultants has led to a lack of accountability and increased costs. Property owners are forced to compensate consultants upfront prior to review, starting without any framework for timing and reviews, schedules, or estimates of costs for services. The consultants often draft, interpret, and enforce all ordinances, consolidating multiple governmental roles into a single private entity. They serve as the legislative, the judicial, and the executive branches of government, all while being paid by the hour by the property owner with zero accountability for costs and timing. Regarding the horizontal costs, in the last 15 years, there's probably been no larger increase in cost than that related to stormwater management. Touch on stormwater management briefly. In some cases, stormwater infrastructure costs exceed that of all core utility and paving costs combined. We can demonstrate that. New water quality mandates are often costly, conflicting, lack clear measurable outcomes. These mandates originate from the Chesapeake Bay compliance efforts known as the Chesapeake Bay Tributary Strategy, instituted by the EPA around 2014. Yet the results for the policies enforced by DEP have not met the EPA requirements for reduction of loads by any metric. The answer from DEP has been to expand on the regulation that did not work in the first place, rather than pause and reassess procedures. There are many alternatives to the SWM stormwater management process that could reduce costs and at the same time provide exponentially higher returns on investment for water quality. However, there's not seemed to be a political will for such investigation. Alternative approaches could reduce costs, improve outcomes with better regulatory collaboration and some honest dialogue. Lastly, we'll discuss briefly the NPDES permitting process. The current NPDES threshold in Pennsylvania is 1 acre. If you exceed over 1 acre, you're required to obtain an NPDES. That burdens small projects, particularly those of an infill nature, the types of projects that should be a focus for growth. Neighboring states, that threshold is 5 acres. New Jersey, Virginia, Maryland. However, Pennsylvania remains 1. That is a large stumbling block. In closing, this has just been a brief review of several major regulatory drivers affecting the cost of housing. Addressing affordability will require reassessment of these systems to reduce unnecessary costs while maintaining essential protections for municipalities. However, what seems to be lacking is an appetite for honest dialogue and collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hess. Mr. Weaver.
Thank you for the opportunity to share with you on a subject I care deeply about. My name is Cliff Weaver. I'm the owner of Landmark Homes, regional builder serving communities across South Central Pennsylvania. My brother and I founded Landmark Homes in '98 with the goal of giving every home buyer a custom home experience, regardless of the size or price of their home. Over the years, we have experienced both highs and lows of this industry. Today, one of the greatest challenges we face as a home builder in Pennsylvania is limited land availability and zoning-related constraints. Housing affordability is one of the most pressing challenges facing Pennsylvania today. It's estimated that more than 1 million households are cost-burdened, meaning they spend over 30% of their income on housing. At its core, this issue boils down to a lack of supply to meet demand. We believe one of the most effective ways to address affordability is to bring new homes to market, particularly for what we call move-up buyers. Move-up buyer is someone who has owned a home for several years, built equity, and is ready to purchase a larger home as their family grows. When they do so, they sell their existing home, typically an entry-level property, thereby turning inventory and making that home available to a first-time buyer. As supply increases, it can help ease cost pressures, improve affordability, and make home ownership attainable for the next generation. However, delivering new homes for move-up buyers presents several challenges. The maps in front of you show zoning across a few select municipalities in Lancaster County. As you can see, land zoned for development is highly restricted, and in some areas, only a small number of parcels are available for development. Even then, zoning does not guarantee availability, as many landowners are simply not interested in selling the land. So Trenton here has prepared a few printouts of some of the townships that we work in or work around. And we just want to demonstrate a little bit of some of the challenges we have in what we're going to call land availability. The first presentation he has here is at North Anvil in Lebanon County. And you can see the small number of areas zoned residential down in the bottom corner. And probably these are not served with sewer or water in those markets. A lot of those areas are also developed, and so there would not be any access to any more homes to be built in that area. So you can flip to the next one. Thank you. Next one is Strasburg Township. This is a lot of those areas in yellow are the only areas that could be developed. A large portion of those are already developed at this point. There's only one small parcel that hasn't been developed. The second area that I circled there is zone residential. Currently, it's a cemetery. Although it's high density use right now, it doesn't help for the rest of us living. But again, those are areas that we cannot add to. You like that? So those are, you can look on that map and you can see, the areas that we have the opportunity to build on are restricted down to, one area in that township. So you can go to the next one. And many of these townships you guys know, you represent. Leacock Township, again, an area that we know well. The areas in the yellow are developed. There's a small portion there, maybe 20 acres. Interestingly enough, and again, you look at zoning maps and you think, well, there's areas there to be developed. Well, the one area I'm going to circle is a municipal park, and I don't think they're going to give that up. So we've written off cemeteries and municipal parks, and so again, you can see where we're limited in our growth opportunities here. Flip to the next one. This is Brecknock Township, an area township to where we're at, from close to where we're currently at. You can see the yellow in there. Those areas have been developed. There's no more open land there. The largest area is Hawk Valley Golf Course, and that's completely built out at this point. There's a couple areas. There's a public school that's zoned residential, and that's in this area here. So the chances of us putting houses on those areas that I'm circling shows you the challenges, and also shows you the limit of area that we can potentially build in. The last slide, and we'll just put this one in there, is the preserve farms in the Lancaster County region that we work in. And again, presents itself as a challenge that we are all familiar with. I'll continue on with my prepared statement here. Yeah. So as I shared with you, some of the challenges with the land availability in the proper zoning areas, and again, rezoning the agricultural land has its own challenges. Utility access presents another major hurdle. Developers must determine whether sewer, water, or electrical services are available. In many cases, we must invest hundreds or thousands and even millions of dollars to expand these services. These costs directly impact housing affordability and can sometimes make projects financially unfeasible, even when on paper zoning allows for growth. Additionally, site conditions such as topography, geology, environmental factors can further limit development potential. These challenges have compounding effect on affordability. Not only is there a limited supply of developable land, but the scarcity drives up land prices. Even if suitable land can be found, the approval process is frequently lengthy and complex. For example, we work through municipal approvals. We often encounter strict subdivision and land development ordinances requirements, such as widening existing roads, adding curbs, sidewalks to existing roads. While the state law allows applicants to request waivers for these requirements with proper justification, those waivers are not always granted. In many cases, municipalities deny them due to concerns about public opposition to avoid the perception of giving a developer a win. As a result, the land development approval process can take anywhere to 2 to 4 years or longer. Additional approvals from outside agencies such as Department of Environmental Protection, PennDOT, can further increase costs and delays. While this process unfolds, developers are often carrying the cost of land, including interest expenses, which can increase acquisition costs by 10% or more a year. Although future land use planning occurs at both the county and local levels through comprehensive plans, these plans are not always implemented, often due to public opposition. This leads to zoning maps that are not consistent with anticipated growth, or in many cases, the actual growth and real needs of a municipality. There are several policy proposals and changes that I believe could meaningfully expand access to home ownership in Pennsylvania and address some of these challenges. First, we should encourage greater alignment between county and regional comprehensive plans and current zoning maps. If areas are identified for growth, municipal zoning maps should reflect that intent in a predictable and actionable way. This will also take development pressure off agricultural land outside the growth area, ensuring that farming and ag activities remain a key part of our state and local economies and culture. Second, we should strive for more consistency and predictability in the land development approval process. Establishing and enforcing clear timelines and objective standards for approvals and waiver requests would reduce uncertainty, lower carry and professional costs, and accelerate the delivery of new housing. Third, we should look for opportunities to expand infrastructure investment, particularly for water and sewer capacity and conveyance. Strategic public-private partnerships or targeted funding programs could help offset the upfront costs and currently make them more could offset upfront costs that currently make many projects unfeasible and also help to modernize aging infrastructure in many of our municipalities. Fourth, we should explore creative incentives for municipalities that proactively plan for and approve housing development. Communities that are willing to accommodate growth should be supported and highlighted as models for keeping Pennsylvania competitive as a place to grow families and businesses. Just about done. Fifth, we should encourage a review and modernization of certain subdivision land development ordinances requirements that may longer reflect current needs, planning considerations, or market realities in terms of housing styles, property layouts, while still maintaining safe and quality standards. Finally, we should support policies that promote thoughtful mixed-use land planning and a variety of housing types, including single-family townhomes and attainable options, so that all home buyers have opportunities to enter and move within the market. There's no simple fix that will automatically expand across access to home ownership. This requires a coordinated effort to address land availability, fix regulatory processes, expand and modernize infrastructure, and focus on long-term planning. As builders, we stand ready to be part of that solution, but we need a framework that allows us to respond to this need in a timely and cost-effective way. In closing, I would like to emphasize that housing is more than just a commodity. It is a foundation for strong families, stable communities, and economic growth. When we make it easier to build homes, we make it easier for Pennsylvanians to achieve the dream of home ownership. Thank you again for taking the time and consideration. Again, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Mr. Massioli.
Good morning. My name's Mario Massioli. I'm the owner of Acorn Built Homes. I want to thank Representative Zimmerman for inviting me here today to meet with the committee and provide testimony and industry insight regarding specifically accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. We appreciate your leadership on this issue and the opportunity to share our experience working with homeowners and municipalities throughout the southeastern Pennsylvania region. A little bit about the company, because it's important to provide some context for this discussion. Acorn Built Homes is a Pennsylvania residential design build firm. We specialize in accessory dwelling units, high-quality additions, and all kinds of custom residential projects. Our company was created to provide homeowners with a fully integrated and professionally managed experience from initial feasibility and permitting through design, construction, and project completion to remove the complexity associated from a construction as well as a township or municipality perspective from any kind of major residential project. We focus on delivering thoughtfully designed, fully code compliant structures that are built on permanent foundations and constructed on site using traditional stick-built construction methods. We're not prefabricated or transported in. Every project's customized to the homeowner's property, the municipality requirements, and the customer's long-term needs. The company is built around two principles. We're committed to delivering residential structures of the highest quality and craftsmanship. Our projects are designed and constructed as permanent extensions of a home and neighborhood fabric with full kitchens, bathrooms, utility connections, and move-in ready finishes. The other thing that we're about, and it's probably even more important, and not that our quality isn't a big focus, but equally as big, is the customer experience. We built this company around simplifying an otherwise difficult and fragmented process. We assembled an experienced team to manage permitting, zoning, design, interior design, land development, engineering, construction, and utility connections under one roof. So we do all of that on behalf of our customers. And our goal is to remove the uncertainty and create a clear, professional, guided process for homeowners. Throughout our work in the market, we have developed meaningful insight into both consumer demand for ADUs and the regulatory barriers that currently limit their practical implementation across Pennsylvania. Demand for ADUs is significant and growing rapidly. We currently receive somewhere between 200 to 300 leads or inquiries a month, and we've conducted hundreds of property consultations with homeowners throughout southeastern Pennsylvania. The strongest driver of demand, and this is true nationally as well, and I should state that, don't quote me on this, but I believe 12 other states have passed a bill like House Bill 2186, making ADUs a by right for all homeowners in the state. So the strongest driver is aging in place, where people do not want to go into assisted living. They're concerned about the care. They're concerned about the cost. The second driver is adult children who can't afford rent or can't afford a starter home, so they move back in with their parents. And a third use case is rental income. People want these things to supplement their income, and because people just need money. And I think once this bill is passed, the demand for this is going to be significant. Municipal regulations surrounding ADUs are inconsistent and create confusion and unpredictability for homeowners. Many municipalities, in fact the majority, do not permit ADUs by right at all, while others require conditional use, zoning hearings, special exceptions that add considerable time, cost, and uncertainty to the process. In many cases, municipalities only permit ADUs as an attached extension of the house, the main house, which substantially limits design flexibility and prevents many homeowners otherwise viable properties from accommodating accessory living spaces. Homeowners are often surprised to learn that regulations can vary dramatically from one municipality to the next despite similar neighborhood and property conditions. Setback requirements frequently make otherwise appropriate ADU projects infeasible, particularly on smaller suburban residential lots. In many municipalities, rear yard and side setback requirements, which were probably put in place long before this concept of an ADU ever was a thought in anyone's mind. They leave insufficient buildable area for a detached accessory structure, despite ample room existing from a practical perspective. Based on our experience evaluating residential properties throughout southeastern PA, reduced setback requirements are critical if ADUs are to become a realistic housing option for average homeowners rather than only those with large properties on or estate-sized lots. And the other thing I would add here regarding the lot size is, in cases where ADUs are allowed, this lot size requirement is usually some multiple of the actual zoned lot size. So you might have a lot size zoning in a district within a municipality of an acre, but you have to have an acre and a half to do an ADU, or in some cases in Lancaster County, you have to have 10 or 20 or 30 acres. So it makes it impractical for the majority of people. Restrictions on kitchens and cooking appliances significantly undermine the intended function and usefulness of ADUs, which are really a tiny home on a property. Many municipalities prohibit full kitchens, built-in cooking appliances, or independent utility configurations out of concern that ADUs will become improperly used rental units. In practice, however, these restrictions often make the spaces less functional for senior, adult children, caregivers, and long-term family occupancy. In our experience, homeowners seeking ADUs overwhelmingly desire fully functional, self-contained living spaces capable of supporting independent daily living. The last issue I'll touch on are septic system regulations, which my colleagues here have touched on as well. And approval processes currently represent one of the practical barriers to ADU construction in many areas of Pennsylvania. County level requirements, county health departments, and the Pennsylvania DEP processes associated with additions, secondary dwelling units, or expanded bedroom counts often create substantial engineering costs, extended timelines, and procedural complexity. In many situations, the cost and delay associated with septic approvals can make otherwise reasonable construction projects financially infeasible for homeowners. We've encountered numerous cases where residents interested in creating housing for aging parents or family members ultimately abandon the projects due to septic-related costs and uncertainty. And we've even lost customers who were signed customers who asked to get out of the deal because, you know, the septic-related costs that I'm talking about were just made it, you know, a non-starter. So again, I appreciate your leadership on this whole issue. I'm thankful for the opportunity to testify today, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Massioli. I know we've got some questions up here. I'm going to turn it over to the members. They might ask you questions directly. They might ask the panel as a whole. You're welcome to jump in. We're here to learn from you. So even if you're not asked a question directly, feel free to chime in if you've got something to add, because you guys are the experts, and what you share with us, we're here to take back to Harrisburg. We're going to start things off with Representative Jones.
Thank you. So, Mr. Marcioli, Mario, when you're talking about ADUs, and you hit on some of the requirements that are, you know, outside of necessarily the local zoning. Of course, you run into the local zoning issues with the whatever municipality you might be dealing with. However, do you also run into like the EDUs, like the number of? Can you speak to the EDUs? I mean, there's going to be other prohibitive factors in place, even if the House bill does pass.
Correct.
Some of these other, prohibitions to. It's not like you're going to put a tiny home in everyone's backyard. I live in that deep. We looked at Ag Preserve. I live in that dark red spot that was on the map over in East Donegal Township, but I live in a little town called Maytown, and some of the concerns there, having been a former township supervisor myself, as I've tried to educate myself on the rising demand for ADUs, some of the concerns I hear from residents and from local municipal officials is, in Maytown, of course, you'd be worried about parking, because it's, average of 1, maybe 2 cars per ADU, somewhere in that ballpark, but that adds up. I have learned, you're not going to be able to put an ADU in everyone's backyard, that sort of situation. But what do you run into when it comes to the EDUs and actually the utility hookups?
Well, specific to public utilities, we usually don't run into a problem. It's as simple, we in most municipalities are required to connect to the utilities associated with the main house on the property. So we're tying into various access points for sewer as well as the water main and of course the electric panel. And we trench each of those connections from the ADU. In septic communities, where you're talking about EDUs, there are regulations that are not consistent around, how many EDUs is an extra bedroom, as an example. And in some cases, the house itself, when it was built, the main house, will have a requirement of 100 EDUs per bedroom. So say they have a 4-bedroom house, and that means they have 400 EDUs. And let's say their septic tank has 1,000 capacity. Well, in some, the DEP and Chester County Health, as an example, if you add a bedroom, that counts as 400 ADUs. And when I inquired as to the rationale for that, there was really no rationale for that stated. I'm not saying there isn't a good reason for it. I just wasn't able to learn it. So that means now I have to get a new tank. Now I have to get a new septic design. I have to get a new septic system. That invokes the DEP and a long-term, what they call their Module 2 planning process, which can be 6 to 9 months to a year. It means I have to hire an environmental consulting firm and engineering firm, rather. There's perk testing, all these types of things. And I'm not an environmentalist, so I don't look lightly as to say, oh, those things aren't valuable. But they make an affordable structure for, $150,000, $200,000 unit become a $250,000+ project, which basically makes putting an ADU in a septic community very difficult from a affordability perspective.
Right. So a top-down piece of legislation that you mentioned that would make ADUs available by right, that wouldn't necessarily help in that situation, correct?
No, and that's why the issues I brought up have to be looked at, and I've provided this information to Representative Inglis, who's the sponsor of the bill. I had a meeting with him, as I have Representative Zimmerman. And these other things, the setbacks have to be looked at, the septic requirement, the stormwater management stuff, the EDU requirements, lot size requirements for ADUs. There's a lot of things, way too many to go into minutia here, that if they're not looked at, and I'm not suggesting it's an easy process to do that across all of these municipalities, then it will make the ADU law, while well-intended, not very practical to make any kind of change.
Understood. Yeah, that's sort of, again, as I looked into this and, I looked at the legislation and considered the legislation, you get into the details of it, I found that to be the case, that until we address some of these other issues that impact that availability, we can allow for it, by right, but there are so many other factors that are going to come into play, setbacks, impermeable surface.
Correct. Impervious coverage.
Impervious coverage for stormwater. And these are things that are legitimate concerns.
Yes.
Very much so. I mean, if you're going to hook up to a public utility or hook up to a existing septic system, does it have the capacity? These, they're obviously very legitimate concerns, but those are some of the hurdles that you have to overcome.
And there's ways that you can, for instance, you could require that a grading plan is associated with an ADU. Now, that's a few $1,000s expense from a civil engineer, which, we provide for our customers. It's not a showstopper for most, people capable of affording one. And you can design it so that the stormwater management is handled. But it is a serious thing that has to be addressed, because you don't want flooding happening, and either on their property or their neighbor's property or whatever.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, there's definitely plenty for us to stay focused on, especially when you get into the details. Thank you.
Online, we've got Representative Robert Ledbetter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate Representative Zimmerman's leadership in this space, and for you gentlemen who have testified with us this morning. Very grateful for the insight, because I believe it validates a lot of the concerns that we as lawmakers in Harrisburg have received from our constituents. But it also presents an opportunity this morning to hear directly from you all in the challenges and hurdles that you face every day within your communities. With that in mind, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to provide some context with some of those concerns or points of feedback that I've received within my district, and then direct a question to the panelists. So, gentlemen, when I grew up, I had the opportunity to experience what the 80s and the 90s as far as building infrastructure afforded me. Had a wide street lights, homes that were placed on quarter or half acre lots. And a lot of the design was open and spacious for the subdivisions. As you guys have testified this morning, it really concretizes the contrast between what a lot of folks today that are in their child rearing years, mid 30s, early 40s, raising families, working jobs, they still anchor, I believe, in their minds when they think of home size, street design, setbacks, the architecture and green space, to what they experienced. And representing a district that's very rural, very agrarian, that's even magnified beyond the traditional neighborhood that I just described to you, where it goes into multiple acres in subdivision containing a single family home, and the opportunity to have chickens and storage sheds on the properties. But when we look at the development today, you all testified on a variety of hurdles that are preventing young people from getting into homeownership. But again, when we contrast, the 80s and 90s versus today, you have historically single family homes that were 2,000 square feet and split levels or single stories. And then now you have slightly bigger average footprints, but more vertical. You have quarter acre lots that were very common to now today, homes being maximized on that footprint. We see starter family homes not being 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage builds, but instead townhomes or duplexes, split houses. So my question to you all is, the constituents still desire and dream for what it was that they saw their parents afford them in growing up, and they still have that motivation to acquire it. But you all have outlined very clearly this morning the regulatory hurdles, whether it be ADUs or EBUs, like the accessory dwelling requirements, the runoff, the sewer requirements, all of the regulatory hurdles that come to preventing the business decision being made to actually build these communities. Mr. Chairman, if I may just build my point even further, it's recognized during holidays, whether it be trick-or-treating activities with families, community yard sales, these hamlets or neighborhoods that are nestled within our municipalities, our townships, our boroughs, they're almost viewed as idyllic. People seek the opportunity to go and look at Christmas lights in these neighborhoods, or have their kids trick or treat in these neighborhoods, or participate in a community yard sale, because these neighborhoods represent something that isn't being developed anymore. And because it's not being developed anymore, isn't accessible either. And if it's not accessible and it's not being developed, then it's something that is in danger of fading away. So my question to you guys, and now here's lies my question. My question is that in a future world where we as the legislature are able to work with local government and county government and get some of these regulatory hurdles out of your way, would you still be prevented from developing these types of communities that were once standard across the American landscape? Or would profitability and other metrics prevent it from happening? And if it would prevent it from happening, can you speak to what those hurdles are and what your industry is considering in order to get over them? Or are we just done? Is the neighborhood of the 1980s and the 1990s dead, and the ones that exist? So where are we at?
Yeah, thank you for that comment. Let me just address that a little bit in my testimony, and let me expand on it a little bit. Again, this is Cliff Weaver with Landmark Homes. And I've been building in the Lancaster market for 40 years. And what the MPC code set out in 1968 was to designate certain areas for residential zoning. And those were clustered mainly around the small towns in Pennsylvania. And specifically looking at Lancaster County, a lot of those areas, and I provided maps, and I don't know if you can see it, what we were looking at, but I provided maps of zoning that's currently in place. These areas have been developed, and so there is, we can't build the neighborhoods. There's no area that we can go and build in without getting zoning changes, and the likelihood of us getting zoning changes is pretty small. And so that's what's stopping us. We'd love to build, communities for the family to raise their family and have a dog in the backyard and an area to play, but we're not able to do it, not because of restrictions, not because of regulations, but because of zoning restrictions. And you can see on these maps, the limited areas, and what happens is those limited areas become highly valuable, and so that prohibits anybody from going and building some of the homes, the split levels, the bi-level homes you were talking about. So now we're forced to put larger homes on smaller lots.
Yeah, thank you, Cliff. Randy Hess. So I appreciate your question. I couldn't agree more. And to be honest with you, Representative Ledbetter, I would love nothing more than to build those traditional neighborhoods again. On top of what Cliff, I'll expand on it, it honestly becomes a lot more of an economic driver, right? So if you are fortunate enough to land, to find a piece of land where you could build that traditional neighborhood, the cost to improve the land is so expensive that it really becomes an unattainable property for that young family. Understand it's market driven. So you've got, let's say you want to build let's call it an affordable single family house, $500,000, which is really almost not possible to build in Lancaster County, a $500,000 single family house. If I build a 1,800 square foot two-story on that property, it's probably not going to appraise because the house is too small. And it can't be done. I was fortunate enough to land a small property, call it an infill, in Lancaster County where we got 10 lots of that traditional nature. We're just wrapping it up. Actually closed on the last one yesterday. 1/3 acre lots. That home sold for $970,000. Okay, we had to do a 3,200 square foot house on that lot just to justify the cost of the lot. That lot alone, and I'm not just talking about the physical cost of the stormwater infrastructure that was installed for that individual lot. If I go through the entire development process from day one, the engineering costs, the regulatory burdens of that stormwater facility, my cost is about $85,000 just for that stormwater facility for that one lot. That is a large burden. We haven't even gotten into the land development approvals, the infrastructure, the water and sewer tapping fees, that is strictly stormwater for one lot. And I would like everybody to digest that for a minute. When I have a customer come to me who owns a building lot and they say, I bought this lot, I'd like to build a house on it. And I say, did you look into the utilities and the stormwater yet? Well, no, we didn't. I wish you would have called me before you bought the lot. Because we have multiple projects. Hey, I have this half-acre lot. Well, guess what? You can't afford to build on it. Because on one single-family lot, not talking a development, 9 months to a year just for the process. Figure plus minus $30,000 just in engineering fees. Then the cost of the system, you're really looking at $100,000 to get your stormwater in for that lot, which often exceeds the cost of the lot itself. So this is where we've gotten. So my answer is, I would love nothing more than to build 1,500 to 2,000 square foot houses on a 1/3 acre lot. I agree with you 100%. We just physically cannot do it. And just to touch on where we are, I'm always skeptical of statistics. Always consider the source and we get their data, but 2025, median age of first-time home buyers in the United States. According to the Federal Reserve, the average age of a first-time buyer in the United States in 2025 was between 34 and 36 years old. According to Redfin and the Census Bureau, the median age was 35 years old. According to the National Association of Realtors, the median age for a first-time home buyer in America was 40 years old. I bought my first house when I was 18. We are a 60-year-old building company, family business. I'm passionate about home ownership. Development and building has been treated as a pariah in society, unfortunately. I have seen that turning a little bit in recent years, and what seems to be sinking in to a lot of people, particularly in this area, is their children and grandchildren are trying to buy a house, and they're shocked, and they want to know what happened. And we're trying to explain to them what happened and why this isn't attainable.
Can I follow up and ask you a little bit more? So in just a short few years, I remember hearing, stormwater costs for an average lot, you're 20 or 30 grand, in just for your stormwater. But the numbers that you were just talking about far exceed that. What has changed in the last 5 years with stormwater requirements? And where is it coming from?
It's an excellent question. So it's always site-specific, Representative Jones. What I would say is it's predicated largely on municipal ordinance as well as DEP requirements. So what we run into is DEP has what they call their BMP manual.
Right.
That's what dictates NPDES and dictates stormwater. They update it regularly. Coming out of the 2014 Section 102 stormwater requirements, which I'll be honest, I've always referred to as the no engineer left behind law.
Right.
DEP set the standards. DEP allows up to 5,000 square feet of disturbance and impervious area without getting into what's called a major stormwater management plan. Most ordinances have a major and they have a minor. The municipalities then set a threshold. We say this is the threshold between a major and a minor stormwater plan. When you can get in under a minor, and I did one in, well, I think it was East Onagle. It was a 2,500, and we slid it in at 2,500. The stormwater cost was modest, $25,000,
Okay.
something of that nature. If you get into a major plan, now you have engineering involved. A minor plan is basically taken from a chart. Here's the stormwater bin you have to install. This is the impervious area. This is how big the bin has to be. It's a relatively, I call it, simple process for those of us who do this regularly. The costs are there, but they're mitigated, so to speak. Once you get into a major plan, now you're looking at 9 months to a year, $20,000 to $30,000 just in engineering, and that's just to get it approved. We didn't even get into the financial security and the release of that and the inspections and the as-builts after the fact. So the question becomes, why do municipalities set the threshold artificially low when DEP allows 5,000 square feet? We're talking about scattered lots. I don't have that answer. I have a theory. I can tell you one municipality where the threshold is 1,000 square feet. If you go over 1,000 square feet, you have to do a full plan. That's it. There's no such thing as a minor plan. In my opinion, those are set by the consulting engineers for the municipality. It's the consulting engineer who sets the policy, writes the ordinance, gets approved by the municipality. Well, when you set the threshold at 2,500 or 2,000 or 1,000, not 5,000 where DEP allows, why would you do that? In my opinion, it's guaranteed workload.
That's something that we should definitely consider at the state level.
Just
I mean, if
pointing
we
it
have DEP setting that threshold at 5,000.
Correct.
That perhaps is something that needs to be looked at so that that's the consideration that's applied
Just to drive that home,
evenly across the Commonwealth.
I will drive that home with one quick story. I was at a municipal hearing at a township. It was not my project. It was somebody else. It was a homeowner who had bought a house whose impervious area was maxed out at 2,500. Of course, the homeowner was unclear. He wasn't of the regulations. Upset that he would have to do a full stormwater plan to add a garage. I heard a township supervisor, a man who I know and who I respect, he's a good man, tell that homeowner, our hands are tied. DEP only allows us 2,500 square feet. That township supervisor was not lying to him. He clearly didn't know himself what the rules were, because I'm quite sure they were told by the municipal engineer that it's 2,500. So these are the nuances, the unclarities that we run into, and trying to explain this to your average homeowner who just wants to build a house
Right.
is challenging.
Yeah, I personally ran it. I ran into this too, with the installation of patios, walkways, retaining walls, and so forth. You know, when that property is already maxed out on its impervious, the cost of even just putting a patio on a home jumps by $5,000 to $10,000 because you have to put in an underwater, or I'm sorry, an underground stormwater retention system.
I don't mean to monopolize, I apologize, but on the
That's good
stormwater,
information, thank
on the stormwater side, the other conflict you have, and I'm sure Cliff can speak to it on a large-scale project, is the conflict between the updated BMPs and local ordinances. So you have townships who spend a lot of money, unfortunately, to update their ordinances when the BMPs came out circa 2014 or shortly thereafter. Maybe they spent $100,000, $150 to update their ordinance. Well, as DEP updates their manual every 2 years, it ratchets up the requirements on the NPDS. Now, we have an instance with a large project right now where the township and the township engineer is saying, we don't want any of that. We don't want it here. We don't want that applied in our township. It conflicts with our ordinance. However, we have to do it to satisfy the NPDS and the townships can't afford to update their stormwater ordinance every 2 years to keep up with the NPDS. So there's a project where we lost an entire year with the consultants bantering on how we comply with DEP while still complying with your ordinance. So we get caught in the middle of that. And honestly, there's an instance where the township's caught in the middle of it as well. I can't necessarily blame them.
Representative Gleim.
Thank you, Chairman, and I want to thank all of the panelists here today as well. I'm from Cumberland County, and we are expanding daily here with population and housing issues. And one thing that I've learned through all the panels that I've been on housing is that the extra costs associated with regulations and zoning are eating into the profit margins of all of the builders and making it impossible to build without being subsidized on one side or the other. Like either you need to be subsidized or the homeowner needs to be subsidized. And in order to actually afford a house today, coming from an agricultural perspective, the farmers in our area can't even expand their businesses and provide food and those necessary things in our area because of the NPDS regulations of just 1 acre. So I just want to put that plug in. I want to talk about something to solve the issue or help solve the issue. When I first got elected, we had real issues and still do to some respect with all of our firefighters and first responders. And a Senate bill came through called Senate Bill 6, where all of the people got together knowing that there was an issue, knowing that they needed changes, and they came up with an omnibus bill that targeted the problem and the issues. And what I wanted to know is, do you know of any comprehensive effort on the side of the homeowners and or municipalities or legislators that has started, or would you be open to something like that where we set everybody around the table, including DEP and the engineers and everybody, and say, we have to solve the housing issue. How can we make it more affordable for everybody? Have you heard of anything like that?
I personally have not. I would be more than willing to have those discussions. I've been a fairly harsh critic of DEP over the stormwater management requirements. I would love nothing more than to sit down and have an honest dialogue with people at DEP to discuss their policies. I will say that DEP has done some good things. One thing they have implemented in replacement of the traditional stormwater management is a floodplain restoration program, of which I completed my first one. and I'm actually a huge fan of it. So I'll give credit where credit is due. I think that was a big step. The issue with a floodplain resto is that not every site is able to accommodate that. However, there are instances where you could control your rate and volume, which is what stormwater management was started as, and do your water quality off-site. That would exponentially increase environmental benefit and reduce cost. And I think that's an important bifurcation of stormwater, because what has driven the cost of stormwater, in addition to taking up much more of the developable land, is the water quality standards. We all want water quality. There are ways to do it much more efficiently that I think DEP should examine, rather than trying to achieve their water quality standards on site, to which I would argue minimal, if any, environmental benefit. It's essentially paperwork. So to answer your
Right.
question, I personally would love to have dialogue, as long as we are allowed to be open and honest. And as far as the relationship between our industry and agriculture, there's no reason it has to be exclusive. We can certainly work together. There's no reason at all. And I think some of the issues ag-related that you're referring to, we could help with, if we were only required to do rate and volume and could do those water qualities off-site. It would be a savings. I think it's worth examining. Thank you.
That's great. And we also have about 1,500 municipalities, and every municipality has different ordinances. And so maybe there can be some general, changes across the state, and something that every builder can know that what they're going to be getting when they get to a municipality that aligns then exactly what you said with the county, and then also then aligns with the state agencies that are creating those regulations. But I would really be thankful to have, work with the Senate, and maybe through this policy, forum, where we could put up some type of omnibus bill that helps regulate. We have to have regulations in most cases, but that they are standard across all of the state. So thank you for being here, and thanks for your testimony. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I'd like to address a little bit of the stormwater aspect of it. As Randy stated, the regulations continue to change, and it's really difficult to navigate through because there are so many different aspects of stormwater. And currently, over the past number of years, we continue to look at infiltration aspects of it. And so on a project not too far from here, because DEP regulations changed in the past 2 years, it is now, the site did not have good percolation. So because of that, we had to double the size of our stormwater basins to accept the new regulations. And so what that did is it reduced our density that we could allow in there. But not only that, but it increased our costs substantially for that project, and added, we're probably a year and a half additional time to navigate through that, simply because there's no clear path. And again, the regulations are so driven by the site-specific aspects of it. And so what could be allowed in Randy's communities would be completely different than in ours. And so it takes our engineers to figure out what's acceptable through percolation and infiltration, and all that goes into that testing, which again adds to the time. And that's one component of it. I will still get back to, and I want to get back and focus on the aspect of, that's our job, is to navigate through these challenges, and there's reasons why they're in place. But our biggest holdup is, I'll refer back to the maps. I can't navigate through anything if I don't have any land to build on. I can't build a community if it's not existent. We're challenged. We have engineers and we have people that will navigate through it, as challenging as it is. But without a certain amount of zoning relief, we're done building.
Thank you, and thank you, Representative Glenn. I got a couple questions myself, and I'll turn it over to Rep. Zimmerman then. One of the recurring themes because the policy committee has been tackling a lot of the affordability things. We've talked about anything from energy to childcare to healthcare to now housing. And one of the recurring themes is what you were pointing out with the regulatory side, the paperwork side, the compliance side. We had a policy hearing in Northumberland County a year or two ago where it was a husband and wife business, and the husband did the work and the wife did all the paperwork. So 50% of their family-owned business was just paperwork and just compliance. We were out at IUP, and they told us, it was anywhere from 20 to 40% of their workforce was just compliance work. The American Hospital Association reports that $39 billion in costs are attributed in healthcare only to compliance and regulatory paperwork and those sorts of things. So are we seeing that same bleed over into housing for any of your businesses? How many people do you have to have in the office just doing paperwork, just filling out reports, just complying? What is the ratio of people you have actually out there hitting nails to people that you have sitting in the office making sure you check every I and dot every I, cross every T just to make DEP happy?
I mean, at this point, with the continued regulations on DEP and the requirements to inspect these on a regular basis, it added a whole nother layer of staff to us to do that on a regular basis, to the point that it's monitored, after every rain event, and then we have records of it. And so again, it's another layer that we have to monitor and review.
And that's, those costs, right? Who pays those costs at the end of the day?
I mean, the developer pays those costs.
And then from the developer,
So
the home buyer, right?
Right, and that creates a point where it's unaffordable.
Yeah.
So.
And that's what I think a lot of people are missing. I read a very good article. I was trying to find it, I couldn't find it, but talking about all of these ideal, charming European coastal towns that people love to travel to and visit that are walkable or whatever. And the article talked about how you could not build that in America, even if you wanted to, because whether it's stormwater issues or whether it's floodplain issues or whether it's setback issues or all of these things, all of these villages and charming places that people love to travel to, that's the ideal place. I'd love to live somewhere like this. You'll never be able to live anywhere like that in Pennsylvania because you couldn't build it even if you wanted to.
And we haven't talked a lot about the construction of homes and some of the complexity that goes into those. And you talked about regulations. And so our process of doing the blower test door for the efficiency of the home adds another layer of several $100s to every home. Again, the efficiencies that we're required to build to have escalated to the point that it adds thousands and thousands of dollars that no one gets to see and no one understands. Part of it is, have we gotten to the point where we've raised the expense of building a home to the point that we've eliminated people that are living in substandard housing because we're looking for this ideal home and most efficiency? Would it be better for raising everybody up somewhat as opposed to only a few homes built at a high level? And again, it's something to question. There are other states that offer other alternatives to affordable housing expenses.
Yeah, I will, just to piggyback on that, it's been a running joke in my office that I'm not a builder, okay? I'm a compliance officer. I have people work for me, they get to build things, which is what I thought I wanted to do. My entire week is spent on compliance. That is what I do. My focus should be elsewhere. So can we afford to hire more people to do that, adding another layer of overhead? We could. Finding the people with that expertise is easier said than done. There's no class or degree to get in land development in Pennsylvania. It's a trial and error. You learn it or you don't. So yes, it does add, it adds a significant layer of cost. It takes away from the things that you should be doing.
Yeah, the thing that I'll add specific to the accessory dwelling unit business is that the township processes, whether they be special exceptions, conditional uses, variances, and all the other things that have been discussed, have delayed projects, or in several cases, killed projects of customers we had under contract. So we spend an inordinate amount of time managing the customer and keeping them in the game and educating them. And the other thing it did was, for a new business, is it really thwarted my working capital, because I get paid as I make progress on a project. And we do that so we only take a small deposit and we do something, you pay us, and it's a good business model, but it makes being profitable quite challenging, to the point where after we had to actually make a business decision to create a service that we charge for, where we can assess the feasibility of a project, not just from a construction perspective, but from the township and zoning perspective, like all in. So we can tell the customer, this is what's buildable by right, because we no longer get involved. We had to make a decision not to get involved in anything other than by right construction, because we couldn't survive. And here is a pretty clear investment range for what that's likely to cost, all in, including township-related fees. The other thing that we did was, because we have the expertise of over 40 years of residential construction and design experience, 30 years design, we pivoted the building business to, we used to be, I haven't gotten new shirts yet, Acorn Tiny Homes. And this year we made the decision to become Acorn Built Homes, specifically so we could offer an array of construction services that, like remodels and additions, that could be more readily permitted. And we're not abandoning ADUs at all, and we're very excited about the possibility of that business. But we had to pivot to be able to have a business that was viable to pay our people.
Can I ask you?
Representative Jones.
Thank you. Quick question about tiny homes. It's related to what we're discussing. The definition of tiny homes. Is there a clear definition as to what they are? Are they a home, a house, or are they a mobile home? I see some smirks, but or are they? Do they have a VIN number? And are they So can you speak to tiny homes, and is there definition, or does that definition need to be clarified?
Well, the answer is probably the latter, but as far as the tiny home market, not specific to this area, but in general, there are containers, there's mobile, there's prefabricated, and there's what we build, which are real homes on site.
Stick-built on a foundation.
Foundation,
Right.
built to code, fully finished homes. Most townships, most municipalities, for the most part, require it to be a stick-built structure if somebody's going to live in it, and not something that's prefabbed or on wheels or whatnot. Okay. So the definition of an accessory dwelling unit, forget the actual product itself, by most townships is something that somebody is going to live in full-time.
Right.
And has everything that a home would have, full bathroom, full kitchen, etc. But the term tiny home is not something that's specific to regulations, or it's more of a market term.
Okay. So it's, yeah, so once again, we're back to definition being municipality by municipality, with 2,580 municipalities in Pennsylvania, and 1,600 of them having zoning. So 1,600 different definitions, and it might not even be addressed. Also, quick question. When we were talking earlier about EDUs and hooking up to sewer systems, to public utilities, or to a septic system, if we do continue to go down the route of wanting to, advance the installation or the building of ADUs, I'm familiar that some tiny homes had basically their own septic system, where
it was a compact unit, almost like a compost unit. Is that a viable solution, and how does that come into play? I see Cliff shaking his head, so
I don't know.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and also Mario, like your thoughts.
I'll go first.
Okay, Randy.
I'm not sure of the definition of a tiny home, to be honest with you. I think it is nebulous, and it could be. What I can tell you is that the tiny homes that we'll say that you see on TV, okay, they're not on a foundation. You know, they're on a frame, a mobile frame. What has always gotten me is they don't have to meet building codes. We have to build to IRC standards or in commercial IBC standards. Mario, if he's stick building, has to build to the IRC. The UCC, the adopted building code in Pennsylvania, that tiny home on we'll call it the mobile frame, does not have to meet that code. They fall under what's called an ANSI standard. And the ANSI standard oversees RVs.
Okay.
Okay, so in that format, you cannot build a code compliant, quote, residence because you can't meet the IRC. If you're stick building it, you have to meet the IRC, and I think that's probably the reason for municipalities requiring it to be stick built. But I think they're all sort of playing it by ear because it's new. They're trying to figure it out at this point. Yeah.
Mr. Weaver, do you have a thought?
It's, the tiny home isn't necessarily the space that we operate in. You know, I think there's a place for it, and I think, you know, I'm not opposed to it, but again, not familiar with it in great depth.
And Mr. Masioli, you've moved completely to stick build now. Is that correct?
Well, we've been stick-built from the beginning.
Okay.
We chose to enter that portion of the market. We did a lot of research on every municipality from Lancaster up through Northampton County and everything in between before we opened the business. And we knew that, for the most part, there are some municipalities that require an accessory dwelling if they allow them to be mobile. But generally speaking, we didn't see a viable business, and we wanted to build, you know, that's not our DNA. We want to build, these are homes. We
Right.
provide real homes. We do a lot of work to make sure that they're beautiful and there's something the homeowner really enjoys, and they just happen to be on an existing property with an existing home. So that's where we decided to be.
Thank you.
My last question before I turn it over to Rep. Zimmerman, workforce-wise, what is the outlook for you guys? I mean, we've talked to a lot of employers, manufacturers that are either struggling to retain or outsourcing to other states because they simply can't find the workforce here. Are you running into that similar thing looking, 10, 20, 30 years from now? Are you going to have trouble backfilling your bench, or is the workforce here sustainable for what the industry needs?
Well, I'll speak first from the business that we're in. The biggest bottleneck that I see into the future is being able to have construction expertise, general contractors, subcontractors, while maintaining the goal of attainability for these structures, for these homes. And as we grow, I'm always on the recruit for more general contractors to thread that needle. But it is a needle threading experience if you're trying to keep these attainable, which we have increasingly found difficult to do.
Yeah, skilled labor trades are still a major challenge across the board. We've seen a lot of sentiment move in the primary education sector to more trade-related, which I think is a good thing. So we've seen some progress, but is it enough to really make a dent? Every little bit helps. So skilled trades are a challenge, and I think 20 years they'll remain a challenge unless there's a cultural shift, to be honest with you. But I will tell you what I told the chamber when I dropped my membership after 50 years. One of their primary objectives is workforce development, which is admirable. But I told them there's no point in promoting workforce if that workforce can't afford to live in Lancaster County, which is where we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, Randy's correct in that. Finding workers to step into that workforce in the aspect of home construction isn't on everybody's high list of things they want to do and work in 90-degree heat and day and night. So again, we continue to look and build relationships with tech schools and those type of things to pull people into the industry. You know, we are seeing a lot of trades from out of the area drive to our market, you know, and fill those gaps. But it does remain a challenge.
Representative Zimmerman.
The thing I will just add to that, as a business person, if there were less, I mean, building is hard, period. I mean, and it's complex, and as these gentlemen pointed out, we have to work through a lot of stuff, and we have people that can do that. But if, in the ADU space in particular, if the regulatory environment were more pragmatically more favorable, I would have built a much bigger company by now and be employing and way more people and benefiting partners, designers, architects, interior designers. So there'd be a lot more revenue in this business that would benefit people that work in it, would definitely create jobs and help small businesses outside of my own.
Good. Well, I'd like to thank you guys for your testimony, some really good stuff and some really good dialogue here. Also, thanks to my colleagues for some really good questions. So, a couple things. Mario, before we move too far away from what you do, what is the square feet ranges that your units would be?
Well, they can be as big as anyone wants them to be.
Okay, so there's not a limit or
But we
kind of
have
a-
standard models, and
Okay.
those standard models start as small as 240 square feet for a studio, a small studio, and go all the way up through 1,197 square feet for
Okay.
our 3-bedroom model.
Okay, good, thanks. So just yesterday, I got a call from an individual, has a 2-3 acre lot, has a pond on it, has a creek, and it's an approved lot. It's been there for a long time. You know, they kind of use it as an area to have, you know, family and friends at the pond and that kind of thing. And so they decided they'd like to build a house. So after $20,000, trying to get stormwater approved and haven't even asked for a building permit yet, they get a letter from an engineer with 22 items to address. And they decided that's it, they're done. They're just not going to do it. And so one of the things that raises is if it's so complicated, at what point, you know, and we can talk about municipalities and individuals involved here, but at what point and where do individuals understand, you know, the whole tax base, because that's what makes a township work, a borough work, is you got to have some tax base. And if they're going to make it so difficult, we're not going to get as much of it, and then we don't have that tax base either. So just a comment there. Another thing is, I keep saying to DEP, what you guys don't do is you provide no certainty. They don't like that, but that's really where it is, and they keep changing that goalpost. And today, it seems like they cannot get enough of control. They just need to control everything related to, and Randy, you've alluded to some of that as well. The other thing they don't understand or nor care is that time is money. And you guys understand that better than most, that, you know, you're into these projects, and if you can't move them along, you still have holding costs and everything else related with that. And just maybe this last week or 2 weeks ago, DEP added another 500 miles of high-quality streams to their map. So again, if you're trying to build or develop anywhere close to all of that, as you guys know, that's going to add extra cost, extra time, extra everything. One of the biggest complaints that I receive is from individuals involved in the industry is about review engineers. Review engineers costing more than design engineers. I don't know, that sounds criminal to me, and I'm not sure how we move beyond that and what are some of the things we have to do. But I'd like to know, what can we do as a state related to some of this? And let me just give you a couple more, and that is, Cliff, you guys built Hawk Valley, and there's a township that has quite a bit of, you know, sewer capacity, and they've had that, but, and most everything that's zoned according to build is pretty much built out. And so the question is there any real long-term planning or thinking when you have that sewer capacity? Because I'm a big believer in, let's try and do our building and our development, our housing around infrastructure, your sewer, water, because they're huge, vastly expensive projects. Now, you know, Pennsylvania, you know, does do a pretty good job of coming up with monies for sewer and water projects. They are kind of a priority. But if we're going to have those, then why are we not planning a little bit further? And Cliff, you mentioned a comprehensive plan and working with municipalities and maybe, you know, having a little more dialogue on what does this look like, and doing some more long-term planning and thinking is some of my thoughts. Another one I'll give you is there was a $30 million new sewer facility built between two municipalities, a borough and a township. And during the process, they decided to, from the sewer line to a village that DEP had required them to sewer, to make it a smaller line to save a little bit of cost. The challenge is, or what they haven't thought through maybe, is that the next municipality has a village that's also identified by DEP that's needing to be sewered. And so we just spent $30 million on a sewer plant, and there's no plan for any kind of growth. And so, again, what are some of the answers? What can the state do to help with some of that? We are a commonwealth, so it's, and that means there's local townships and boroughs, unlike some states where it's only, you know, county government. But how can we all work together and make more sense and maybe do more long-term planning, which would actually help you guys immensely as well when there's more certainty involved in the whole process. So those are just a couple things I kind of wanted to throw out. There were some really good questions, but I'd like to have, you know, a little bit of feedback on you know, what can we as a state do to maybe help counties or municipalities help you guys. And I know, Randy, you brought up the 1 acre to 5 acres, and yes, for an NPDES permit, all surrounding states, EPA's guidelines, if you disturb 5 acres of land or more, you need an NPDES permit, which is much more costly, much more time involved, as you guys all know. Pennsylvania is 1 acre, and it's been 1 acre. We disturb an acre, or more, you fall into that NPDS range. And so what happens is there's a lot of single lots that fall into NPDS permitting. So that, and we have a bill, as you guys know, Miller and I have that bill, and we really need to get it done. We need the Republicans back in charge so we can get it done, but those are some of the issues. And there's a lot more I could ask and say, but thoughts.
Well, I'm glad you asked, Dave, because I have a few answers for you.
Okay.
Just kidding. I know it's very complicated. 3 points I wanted to bring up. You talked about the engineering aspect of it and what can we do in that aspect of it.
Yeah.
I can take my car to any garage that's licensed and they can inspect that according to what the state requires. I can't do that with engineering in a municipality. I have to work with one engineer designated by the township that I have to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And so they will look at the policies in that township and review it accordingly. We had this issue with the housing when housing inspections came out and the housing code required. We had to work through navigating that. And one of the solutions was we could hire our own inspector, municipal inspector, to look at our homes. That's something that we could look at. That would then potentially speed up the process through the municipality and reduce the cost. Whenever you increase the speed, you reduce the cost of any project that we have there. So look at past that. Let me go and pick any certified engineer licensed by the state and let me review it through the township. So I can check that one off my list. Randy, you're okay with that?
I suggested that a couple years ago. Yeah, I'm on top of it. Yes.
Yeah. No, that's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The other thing is, we deal, I have a project in the Cumberland County area that we had a major 18-inch sewer line running through my project from another municipality. I was required to pump it across town because they had just built a new sewer plant. Mm-hmm. So I had to bore through town 1.5 miles to their sewer plant, put a pump station on my property, total cost of $3 million to do all this, where the gravity flow line went right through my property. So if the state would set up a board that we could appeal that decision to mandate a cooperation and understanding, that would have saved my project $3 million. It goes back to the affordability. If I can save $3 million, that's going to lower my costs. It's going to lower what I'm going to charge customers for lots and homes in that community. But we're handcuffed. We can't go anywhere at this point. We have to follow the municipal authority at that point. Mm-hmm. But if we had allowed that to happen, look at that possibility. But we have no appeal process in that. The other thing is, I'm stuck on this, and I'd be curious to hear what the board would have to say, because we have tiptoed around it, and I haven't really and I'm going to go back to it. We don't have a place to build. Mm-hmm. Brecknock Township, there is no place to build there. So can the state, in some way, and I don't know how that is because it's not very politically appealing to do any land development. We sit here and look at this and say, we need more housing, we need affordable, we need communities where people can live in, the people that work here. But how are we going to accomplish that? We can't build it in thin air. And so how do we go about looking at this? We tiptoe around it because it's not politically appealing.
Yeah.
But and so we can look at that and say, okay, well, we can take industrial land and maybe zone that towards high density housing, that kind of stuff. It doesn't create the homes where someone's going to live in with their family and their chickens in the backyard and those type of things.
Yeah. Well, and again, with these expensive sewer and water systems, it just seems to make sense that there's a little more planning around that, and how do you just grow out from that, so which would really save a lot of costs. But
What I would say, Dave, is unfortunately, in my opinion, a lot of that is done by design. To Cliff's point, whether it's zoning or utilities, it's done by design. This is how we can be compliant with the MPC and still not allow growth. We'll undersize the lines. We'll zone the local park and the cemetery residential, so we meet our MPC requirement for residentially zoned ground, even though we know it's not buildable. That's absolutely done by design in most instances. So without reopening the MPC, which is
Yeah.
a
That's the
daunting
municipal,
task. I
yeah.
don't know that you're going to get there, but I think we all need to be aware and acknowledge that that's done by design. Regarding the engineers, I'm with Cliff 100%. If the state allows us to pick a code enforcement official from a list of 3, actually requires, unless the township has their own in-house, they have to provide you a choice. We don't have that with engineering firms. You are stuck. That's who you get.
So that would kind of create some competition, which would,
Correct. And lastly, on the NPDS, I would suggest to you that if you polled Conservation District employees and said, are you in favor of a 5-acre NPDS versus a 1 acre, they would all applaud. Because they're not funded well enough to handle the workload that is being shoved on them.
yeah.
And
because
I think the conservation districts would applaud that and say, yes, please get these off of our desk.
Yeah. Good responses. So this 40 or $30 million sewer plant has a 40-year loan from USDA, and with no plan for growth. And I see that as really problematic because you've got lots of capacity, and yet there's no opportunity. So to your point, Cliff, if there's a way that we could do more work together as counties, as planning commissions, as municipalities, developers, yeah.
Are your thoughts are that they overbuilt the plant, or your thought, I mean, they overpaid for it? Because they designed it for their planning module that they put in place for the area.
Right.
Did they take that in consideration and overbuild it and now limit growth in that area? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I'm suggesting when we're designing something like that, because if we're not going to grow, it's overbuild. So if we're planning and building something like that, we should be planning for growth and know where that growth is going to come from. So we should consider a whole comprehensive plan, and including that, which would include where the development's going to be and what type of development, and a little more thought into long-range planning and thinking. So that's my thought. Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to add, which is a little different twist, I think, on your question of what can be done. And I'm a newcomer to myself, to this business. I spent my career in corporate America in the technology industry, in senior positions, all customer facing, whether it was channels, direct customers, or delivery. And most of those customers were very large enterprise customers. The whole DNA of the companies for which I worked, the expectations, the hiring, the training, the performance reviews, were all market and customer centric. Do you understand the customer? Do you understand their needs? Do you understand the partner system that also supports that customer related to what we do? And when in my experience of dealing with lots of municipalities through my current entrepreneurial venture, that idea that we're here to serve these residents and understand their needs and how they're changing and what their problems are doesn't seem to be at least widespread in terms of that culture. So I don't know how you solve that problem, whether it's training, hiring guidelines, but unless you have, and I think some of what these gentlemen implicitly said, people that are generally focused on what they're there to do, which is to serve the community that they're privileged to serve, like you gentlemen feel, it's going to be a hard slog to change things because the human behavior isn't aligned with doing that.
Yeah. Well, so there's two pieces of legislation that I have, and one actually would require a municipality to have at least 2 engineers, that you could choose one or the other. So that's sitting in committee. And another one is that all authority members, whether it's water authority, sewer authority, stormwater authority, whatever authorities there are today, those are all appointed by either township supervisors or by borough councils, and this bill would require that they're elected. And I don't know if those things would make any difference, but in kind of wrapping things up here a bit is, what are the things that we could do from a state level? For example, as a Commonwealth, we have these local municipalities, and I think there's a lot of value and good in that, but they have authority to make local decisions, and so as a state, we want to be, make sure we don't limit what they can do and make decisions for that local community. At the same time, is there some overarching laws or policy that we should and could put in place that would actually help them and help, with business like you guys and so forth. So those are the kind of things that we'd like to see. So I want to just thank you guys for this great dialogue, and this will help us, look at other ideas for bills that we could introduce, for policy we could try and forward, and that kind of thing. So thanks, Mr. Chair, for coming to Reinhold's and having a hearing. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Representative Zimmerman, for hosting us. I want to thank all three of you for your time, for sharing your expertise. I think it's a common theme that a generation ago, owning a home felt attainable for almost everyone. But fast forward now, that's very different, right? In the 1970s, the median home value in Pennsylvania was $40,000. Fast forward to 50 years later, median prices approach $325,000. And unfortunately, that's just priced too many Americans out of the American dream. Today's discussion made it very clear that affordability is not just about interest rates or the cost of goods. It's about supply, predictability, and removing those unnecessary barriers that are driving up costs for contractors, builders, and ultimately the homeowners themselves. If Pennsylvania wants to remain a place where families can put down roots, raise children, build a future, we must enact thoughtful reforms like the one shared with us today, like Representative Zimmerman's legislation would do, that will expand opportunities for housing and make homeownership attainable once again. We're going to continue this conversation. This is the first conversation, definitely not the last. We're going to be convening additional hearings on housing affordability and homeownership on May 26th and May 27th. Thank you again, Representative Zimmerman. Thank you to Reinhold's for hosting us. This hearing is adjourned.